So I'll call the meeting to order. And the first item is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a mover? Councillor Stanek, and I can't see the others. Councillor McLaren, and there's Councillor Oosterhoff, which is always good. See, I'm just checking to make sure there's nobody else here. Okay. We've got any additions, subtractions, additions? There'll be a bit of a pause when I ask those questions because I can't see you all simultaneously. Seeing none, all those in favor of the agenda as presented, and that I presume passes. The confirmation of the minutes of December 2nd, 2020. Do we have a mover for those minutes? Councillor Sanik, seconded by Councillor Oosterhoff. You didn't, no?
I wasn't there, Mr. Chair.
Oh, okay, then you're right, you're disqualified. Councillor McLaren, okay. Any issues with the minutes? No, okay, then all those in favor? Passes. And disclosure of pecuniary interest. Do we have any? Not seeing any, okay. The next is delegations, there are none. And then we have two briefings. The first is from the CAO, Ms. Hurdle, on the local food strategy amendments to the Kingston Public Market Bylaw. Ms. Hurdle, are you present?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I sure am.
Yeah.
Sure I am. I also have good evening, members of the committee. I haven't been at an ARC meeting in a while, so bear with me. So I do also have a presentation for the committee members because I recognize that the report that's in front of you has a lot of content. So wanted to get a chance to provide you with some of the highlights. If you could go to the next slide, please, that would be great. Thank you. So the focus of the report tonight is really to look at our food markets and how we can improve our supports to the food markets that we have currently in the city. And more specifically, council members will recall that council gave us a direction to look at the Springer Market Square Public Market, to look at ways to increase local food and to report back in Q2 of 2021. So we know that the time frame is limited because typically we issue the permits and the contracts with and licenses with our vendors by the end of March. Next slide, please. So we have 5 markets in Kingston, and 2 of them are currently located on city property. One of them was located on city property for a while, which is the one in the West End. So the West Market was actually at Memorial Centre for a period of time. At Centre Avenue for a period of time. In its last year of operation, it did relocate to the Rendale Mall, which is basically across the street. But we do have the Kingston Public Market, obviously, that operates on our Springer Market Square, and the Memorial Centre Farmers Market that operates at the Memorial Centre. Those are on city properties. The other 2 are not on city property, which are Westbrook Farmers Market, that's on a church property. And then we also have Community Harvest Market, which is operated on Weller Avenue, and that's done with the Kingston Community Health Centers. So out of those 5 markets, we are expecting the public market, the Memorial Centre Market, and the Community Harvest Market to operate this year in 2021. We have not yet received confirmation for the West Farmers Market and the West Market Kingston. So we're still in conversation with those, but we haven't yet received confirmation. recognizing obviously that COVID-19 has had significant impacts on those markets. Next slide, please. So to give you an overview of the Kingston public market more specifically, because a lot of the proposed changes are focused on this particular market, we wanted to provide you a sense of the attendance and the number of vendors that we've had over the years. So this actually goes all the way back to 2009. So it does give you a kind of a broad range. I would say that 2020 is not really a reliable year because we were during a pandemic. So we know that there are some vendors that actually chose not to attend because of that. So our numbers were much lower in terms of attendance. But looking at, even 2019 or 2018, I think what we've seen is a reduction over the years. Looking back at 2009, we had a total of 50 vendors, and even 2018-19, we were down to 33. So there has been a reduction over the years, and it's been in all categories. We recognize that, but we also know that council wants to try to find ways to better support local food and local producers. So that is the focus that we have taken in terms of this particular review. Next slide, please. So we had a number of discussions with different groups, organizations. So we did consult with Loving Spoonful, the National Farmers Union, Memorial Center Farmers Market representatives. Tourism Kingston, of course, have been quite involved in this process, and a number of vendors from the Kingston public market. So we've had individual conversations as a starting point, and then we also held a meeting where we brought the stakeholders together to have a bit of a discussion around the proposed changes. So we have had different changes or draft changes that we circulated, and then we got some feedback and met again to make sure that we could try to address most of the concerns that were being raised by the various parties. I do want to point out that there are a number of recommendations in the report. Some of them are shorter term, so some of them would apply for 2021, but we recognize that some of them would have to be a longer term approach just because of the amount of change that it would require. Next slide, please. So looking at the 2021 proposed changes, and more specifically to the Kingston Public Market Bylaw. So one of the things we wanted to do is provide further clarification around definitions of who's a producer, who's a reseller, because we had all kinds of, I think, terminology that was being utilized in the bylaw. We talked about farmers, we talked about producers, so it was a little bit all over the place. And looking at some of the best practices as well in our discussion with the key stakeholders, what was identified is basically producers defined as someone who produces 80% or more of their content. And that doesn't mean just fruit and vegetables. For example, we have producers of maple syrups that are at our market. So those would fall under the producer category. Resellers would be those that would have less than that. And typically we would notice the resellers because they have a variety of produce, and some of them that are not available in Canada, typically ever. So we would be able to notice or know quite quickly who the resellers might be. The crafters, we have not necessarily changed that definition. We have added food sampling in our definitions because one of the things that we've heard through the process was that the vendors would like to have the ability to prepare, display, and provide food sampling as well. They felt it was a good way for people to connect to the food and also create an ambiance in the market. We've also made a few changes to special events to include filming activity, because the last time that the bylaw was updated, actually, I believe I updated it the very last time, and that would have been probably in my role as either director of recreation or commissioner. So it was a while ago. And at that time, filming was not high on the list of activities that we had. So we did add filming in terms of our special events. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, sorry. Okay, that's good. So probably the most, or I should say that the biggest concern that was raised by vendors, and by vendors I mean the producers, which of course are the ones that we were trying to work with primarily, was the fact that our bylaw required such a high attendance, 66% of 3 days, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, to maintain their seniority. So for a number of producers, people that actually, are working on the farm, are producing, they felt that that was way too much and they could not commit to that level of attendance. And you probably are aware that other markets, such as Memorial Center, for example, only have 1 day of attendance. And I think what we've heard through the discussions that we've had and from the producers was that 1 day of attendance per week would be reasonable. So we did propose a change in the bylaw to basically require a minimum of 1 day of attendance for producers only. Now, it doesn't mean producers cannot attend more often. They can. If some of them choose or would like to be there 3 days, they can definitely do that. But we wanted to remove that requirement that's currently in place because 66% of the 3 days there was just too much. It was too much for the producers. And a number of them were concerned that they were going to lose their seniority if they weren't able to attend as often. And of course, we want them to keep their seniority because we want them to be able to have prominence within the market. So to help them, we're proposing to reduce that attendance, that minimum attendance requirement. Next slide, please. So reduction of fees. So we had quite a few conversations around this one. And basically what was, I think, proposed at the end of all the discussions that we've had was that the city would consider a 50% reduction in the fee in exchange for a donation, a bi-weekly donation to a service like Food Bank or Loving Spoonful, Martha's Table, etc. And I think what was noted by a number of vendors was that a large number of them already provide donations at different times during the season. So they didn't necessarily feel that this would be an added or would be cumbersome. Now, the way that we've proposed it and structured it is that it would be optional. So it doesn't mean that they have to, it means that they have the option. So for those that it makes sense and they can actually provide a donation, they can request a 50% reduction in fee. And for others, they would prefer not to donate and prefer to try to sell their stock depending on what they're producing. In that case, they would not receive the 50% reduction in fee. We're also proposing a reduction for the casual vendors. So the casual vendors are the ones that are coming in with basically a daily permit. They don't have a seasonal permit. And we're proposing to remove the fee that was applicable to a request for a sabbatical or a leave of absence. And to be honest, that was rarely ever utilized. So I'm not sure why it, and there was very, I think, little work involved with this particular process. So we're proposing to remove that fee as well. The city is still overall responsible for the costs that are related to the market with the market clerk that we have, as well as some of the marketing that we are providing for the market. Next slide, please. So for other markets, what we are proposing, because the other markets are truly farmers markets. So the Memorial Center Farmers Market has producers only. They do not have resellers. And West Market Kingston was the same thing when it was operating. And again, we're unsure if it will be operating or not this coming year. But we are proposing to waive the fees for these two markets because they are producers markets. So again, it's about encouraging our local producers and basically reducing their fees and making it a little bit financially easier for them to get their produce out to the community. So if West Market Kingston was to decide to operate this year and they wanted to operate at Center 70, we would be waiving the fee, and that's part of the recommendation that's in front of the committee tonight. Next slide, please. So some of the other changes that are being proposed, I think what we also heard in our, probably more in our last conversations with our stakeholder, was the importance to have more notification if there were going to be changes to the market. So our current bylaw actually only provides for a 1-week notice if there is a cancellation or relocation. And it was noted that that's a very short period of time. And in 2019, staff actually did a survey with the public market vendors. And at that time, it was agreed that they would pilot a 2 weeks notice with advertising or notification through the city and Tourism Kingston to try to make sure people were aware. So when we had our discussions with the stakeholders, a number of them indicated that 2 weeks was obviously not enough and suggested 6 to 8 weeks. So from a staff perspective, we did take that into consideration, but we also took into consideration the fact that sometimes we have, or we may have, significant events or filming activity where we may not have 6 to 8 weeks notice. So it's very hard to work with, especially 8 weeks. We're talking about 2 months notice. That's a long time. So what we proposed was to change the notice time, which is currently 1 week, to 4 weeks where possible. So that's a significant increase from where the bylaw currently is at. I just also maybe want to note that we went back and looked at in the last decade, we actually had to cancel the market or relocate the market once. And we shortened the hours by 2 hours, I believe, another time. So over the 10-year period, there was one cancellation and one event where we had to reduce the hours of operation to 2 hours. Next slide, please. So a few other recommendations that came out through our engagement process. One was to create a more inviting space. So going back to serving food, and I talked about the food sampling earlier. So I think that's something that was raised by a number of vendors. They felt that it would create a different ambiance and the ability for people to actually eat while being, at the market in the square. And that would be a great opportunity to really highlight what the market has to offer. One thing is for sure, we are going to work with our public health unit and make sure that everything is in compliance with public health regulation. We have been doing that. Actually, we were doing that before COVID. And we were hopeful that in 2020, we would be able to introduce this, and then things changed quite rapidly. The other, I think, thing that came out through our consultation was really about marketing efforts. So providing additional support above and beyond what the city is currently investing for the public market, to have some additional support primarily through Tourism Kingston. So Tourism Kingston does a lot of work in terms of showcasing different initiatives or, it could be restaurants, it could be a number of different offerings that the city has. So Tourism Kingston has committed to actually work with all of the markets, not just the one downtown, but all of them, the ones that will be operational, to offer some promotion through their website and their marketing efforts. Next slides, please. So some of the longer term changes that were being proposed or discussed that we heard actually quite a lot about. One of them was the need to have a more focused market manager. So as you know, there is currently a market clerk that helps to manage the market, the days that the market is operating. But there were definitely conversations about we need to have a bit of a different approach with the market and look at ways to better organize it. So for example, the Memorial Center Farmers Market actually has a market manager type position that helps to not only manage the operations of the market, but looks at marketing and all of those types of things. Now they do keep, so the way that the Memorial Center Farmers Market is organized is that the vendors or the producers pay the organization, and the organization actually keeps those dollars and then is able to hire a manager and pay for marketing as well. There were a number of comments about having a year-round market, and I know that has come up before in the past. So we did identify this as something that we would need to look into as far as options are concerned in the next year. And to be frank, we recognize that there are probably going to be limited options, because in order to have an indoor market, we need to have the appropriate facilities. And also, you know, looking at parking, all of those types of things that we know people are going to be looking for this type of service. There's no question that we think somewhere on the Memorial Center site might make more sense, but that's something we need to look further into, just because we want to make sure that it is appropriate before it's recommended. Number 3 is about changing the way that the Kingston Public Market operates. So I mentioned earlier that the Memorial Center Farmers Market has a very different model where it's actually governed by the producers that are members of the Memorial Center Farmers Market. They pay their fee, they have their own board, they have their own bylaws, and they are self-governing. We do think that that would be a good approach to try to take with our Vendors Association downtown. We would like to empower them to become self-governing organization, and also give them the ability to try to move to a model that is closer to a farmer's market model, which the way that it's currently structured really does not, it really would be difficult to implement it based on the way that it is currently structured. So part of our recommendation is to actually dedicate some resources to the Vendors Association over the 2021 year to help them try to establish what a self-governing organization could look like and the type of bylaws that they would need and how they can actually get set up so they could operate essentially like the other markets that we have within the city and be independent and self-governing. The city would, of course, continue to have a relationship with them because we do have the square, so the Springer Market Square. So we would continue to have a relationship with them, but it would change from what I would currently call more of an enforcement relationship to a partnership relationship. Because we do have our market clerk currently that does, you know, part of the job there is to make sure that people are in the right stalls. So we do have a lot of focus on the enforcement piece, and we would like to change that. And there were comments made by our stakeholders about looking at very much longer term, the possibility of having an overarching market association that would essentially connect all the markets and make sure there's better collaboration across the different markets within the city. Next slide, please. And that's it for my presentation, and I'm happy to try to answer questions. I also see that I have a number of my colleagues on the call, so if I don't have the answer, I might ask for some support. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hurdle. Does the committee have any questions? Councillor Stanek. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, just two questions. One of them is if the public market then becomes a farmer's market, does that mean that there could still be, I can't remember what we call, we have the producers, the resellers, then we have the artisans, right? Can artisans still be part of when it's a farmer's market? Can they?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to look to maybe a couple of my colleagues to jump in here, but I believe the key here is to make sure that it's locally produced. And I'm assuming they could have some flexibility in their bylaws as well. But if I see that Manager Grimman is on the call as well, I believe she has her hand up, so she might want to add to that.
Thank you, Lenny, and through you, Mr. Chair. I certainly, yes, echo those comments. The requirement for farmers markets is more specifically centered around food and the production of local food. Certainly, they want to see when you do designate as a farmers market that is predominantly food-based and it is producer-led, so less on the reseller with some ability to provide some artisan or craft supplies, but the primary function being food production and local foods from a producer-led standpoint.
Okay, I see. So we'll just wait and see then if artisans could still be part of it if it does go from public market to farmers market, because I know that some people really like, to go to those stalls to see the soapstone and the soaps and also like all the tie-dye, like those booths are just really neat. And it always reminds me of Art Fest that we have down at Confederation Basin for just that short period of time during the July 1st weekend. So thanks for answering that question. And my second question is, because we have dropped, I don't have the stats in front, but like say from 50 vendors 10 years ago down to 33 vendors, for the vendors that we've lost, when we bring out this new policy, these changes, will those vendors that we used to have be notified so that they know? Because maybe these changes will then entice them to come back to the public market. So I just wondered if we will be in touch with all those farmers that are not currently, the 50 down to 33 that we had in 2019.
So thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So a couple of things, Councillor Stanek, maybe just to add to the answer provided earlier is that a farmer's market can be designated, but it could also be a farmer's market without necessarily a designation, which I think could provide some more flexibility in terms of the artisan. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there's some flexibility there that the group can look at, and that's what we would want to work with the Vendors Association over the year 2021. In terms of your question, we would definitely work with our partners to make sure notifications are going out to any vendors that are currently, I'm assuming most of them are active somewhere else. And my understanding is a number of them are actually active at the Memorial Center Farmers Market because of the flexibility that, in part because of the flexibility due to the one-day attendance per week. So I think it's not, I mean, we wouldn't want to necessarily steal from another market and take away from another market. I think what we would want to do is try to encourage maybe new vendors to come and work with our partners to do that if that's possible, and hoping that the reduction in fee and the flexibility with the time and the food sampling and a number of those things, hoping that it's going to make it a little bit more attractive for some of our local vendors to attend.
I see. Thank you. So we will do some marketing then to try to bring out new ones. So, okay, that's great. And Mr. Chair, can I just say, remember how you just said, Mr. Chair, that you can't see all of us? When I did my Zoom meeting last night, I realized, like, if you go to view on the top right-hand corner, there's the gallery view and the speaker view, and it looked like all of our settings have defaulted to speaker view. But if you change it to gallery view, you should be able to see all of us. It'll be easier for the hands up anyway. I just wanted to give that tip because I noticed last night it defaulted to speaker view automatically. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. That actually works, more or less. Perhaps the clerk could ask Councillor Holland to turn on her video since she's a member of the committee. I just see the name there, but.
Councillor Hutchison, I've just sent a note to you. I have a conflict on this item, so I
do you?
I won't be participating. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks. We didn't hear that before, so okay, good. So any other questions from the committee? Councillor Ustroff.
Yeah. Hello, Mr. Chair, and thank you. It's really good to be attending. This is my first meeting, so I'm glad to sort of be part of the conversation and have my first look into this committee. So it is something that really is great. I want to commend the presentation because it just resonates as something that we really wanted to hear about the flexibility and what we're seeing, some of the efforts to align a little bit. And I feel really good about that. So I wanted to commend the decision makers on that. I think that's a real reflection of where we want to go. And Councillor Osanik's questions were what's on my mind too. So I really appreciated them and the answers and those considerations. I think that bodes well for us, and as we seek to enhance the market presentation and the, through tourism as well, but through food security and that. So I just wanted to say that, and I don't have a whole lot of other questions, but it really looked good to me, and I thank you guys for that.
Councillor McLaren.
Thank you. I was happy to see that we're lowering the cost of doing business, as a recent motion was helpful in doing that. I think that'll be very helpful. I noticed when you were talking about them moving towards self-governance, will there be any support in the sense of education or oversight to make sure that they have all the things they need, for example, insurance, and understanding of what governance is and how it's different from operations?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So thank you, Councillor McLaren. Absolutely, which is why we structured the recommendation the way that it is to allocate resources. So we will seek some external support as well to make sure that from as they try to establish a non-for-profit corporation, that they have everything that they need and they also understand what's required before they make a final decision as to how they would like to proceed. So we want to make sure they're well informed and educated before that process actually even starts.
Are there any other questions? I don't see any. We can do this formally. I can pass the chair over to Councillor Osanik, or I can just start asking questions here myself. Usually I just do it because it's faster. So I see Councillor Osanik is quite willing for me to just barge ahead, and Councillor Bone too. Okay, So I think why I keep getting this job is I tend to force things through. So I have a number of questions. This is my district, of course, and I have a history with this issue. And it's nicely sanitized in the report, which I thought was a really good report. Don't read too much into that, but the farmer's market, it can be a quagmire. So, and this is not the first time we tried to do something. And I sometimes thought that staff was throwing the kitchen sink and everything else in here. But actually, I think it's a really good report and there's a lot of good things in it. I have a question, specific questions. In terms of the West market, and where do the sale proceeds go in that case? Just out of information, I'm not making a judgment on this.
So thank you. To respond to your question, Councillor Hutchison, my understanding is the West Market, and again, it wasn't operating in 2020, but when it was in 2019, was that it was essentially set up similar to the Memorial Centre Farmers Market, where they had an organization and each producer was paying a fee into the organization. The organization did have a staff member, which I'm not sure how active they currently are, but essentially that's how it was structured. So it was really self-governed, like the Memorial Centre Farmers Market.
Okay. I'm just going to make notes as we go along here. I'll make it quick so I can. Just in reference to my previous remarks, that just as an introduction, I think some of the answers are in the actual bylaw to this, but history tells me to be careful about when we're talking about attendance flexibility and changing the nature of the structure of the organization. Is it felt by staff that the manager can handle the questions of predictability and space sharing between, the casual and the more full-time or the 3-day vendors, preventing questions like these are all arisen in the past, space hogging and other aspects. It does give the manager the final say, I noticed, which may be fine. But we know politically it doesn't always work that way.
So thank you, Councillor Hutchison, and I know that Manager Grimman also has her end up and she might want to add to that. The current process is one where the market clerk does make the final decision if there are vendors that are not, for example, attending the market. So if there is going to be movement on the market, so let's say a producer doesn't attend one day, so there's an empty spot. Currently, the market clerk will make a decision in terms of who can move into that space that same morning. So we're not proposing any change there. That process remains the same. I think what we've tried to do is clarify some of the language because we had so many different sections as it relates to operating hours, setting up hours, and it was a little bit all over the place in the bylaw, and we've tried to pull that together and try to make it a little bit clearer because it was a little bit all over the place. But we're not technically proposing changes with that particular process. I don't know if Manager Grimman wanted to add to that.
Yeah, thanks. Through the chair. Yes, the market manager, what we've done through the updates to the bylaw is, like CAO Hurdle said, really streamline that wording in the bylaw, streamline that timeframe for notification for when vendors do attend or decide not to attend the morning of the market, so that we can quickly, implement changes and move vendors into position to make that market experience as good as possible on each individual given day. In terms of the impact to overall seniority, that really, as CEO Hurdle said, was driven by stakeholder feedback from the vendors that they did want that additional flexibility, and we don't see that significantly impacting their current seniority or attendance records moving forward. So certainly see it as a positive and really just more of a cleaning up of the bylaw wording.
Okay, thanks. You anticipated my next question. So I take it the general answer is we think we can handle this, and all those things that come up. So okay, that's good to know. I take it from the that the total cost of the city this is pretty minimal, $10,000 to $12,000. There's nothing I missed there.
No, Councillor Hutchison, you are absolutely right. That's a pretty minimal overall amount in the total budget, but we recognize that it's an amount that makes a big difference for local producers.
Okay. Now, it talks here about the look and feel of tents and stalls. It's just one little half sentence in there. And to quote unquote, to ensure cohesion. And I think there's some good changes here. I don't know what that means, unless you're going to say that people have to have the same type of tent or stall, and I don't see that going well. So what is meant by that? It's on page, I think 17 of 105 pages. So I just don't want us to go someplace where we probably don't want to end up. No, nobody knows? Okay.
I can take that
The
question.
report.
Yeah, I can take that question. Certainly through you, Mr. Chair. The intention of that wording is really just to provide some consistency to the look and feel of the market. Certainly, we're not asking or requiring all the vendors to have the exact same stall covering or table or different things like that. There's certainly still the opportunity for them to be able to personalize that with their own business signage, with logo tents and things like that. What we want to make sure is that the look and feel of the market is well positioned for the city and the market as possible. And certainly from a safety perspective, we want to make sure that those structures that might be over some of the market vendors are safe as well. So we did see some great success and feedback with the holiday market that the city ran back in December, where we did kind of pull together a consistent look and feel for that. Did receive great feedback, and a lot of the market vendors from the public market did attend that, and also did provide their feedback that they felt that added to the aesthetic of the market as well. So just something that we are trying to support moving forward, but certainly still flexibility for them to provide their own branding and look and feel to their space.
Okay. I'll just put myself down and having mentioned this. So I think that was fine, actually. But now, on the additional food programming in the Kingston public market, it talks about how holiday markets and night markets, and those are fine ideas. The operations of separate markets or initiatives, quote, will not be subject to the KP market bylaw. My question is, why not?
So thank you.
Let me explain myself. It's exactly those kind of disruptions or differences that lead to problems in the past. So I'm just wondering.
So thank you. Councillor Hutchison, for that question. So there are a number of reasons why they would be separate. First of all, the vendors may not be the same. So I just want to be clear, when we're looking at holiday market or night market, we may not have the same vendors that are interested in attending or being part of that. So we're dealing with completely different vendors potentially to start with. Second of all, it does happen during either a shorter period of time with holiday market, maybe different setup because we're also dealing with different time of the year. So it really is outside of what falls under the Vendors Association. So the bylaw that is in front of you is essentially because we have a Vendors Association that does not have its own bylaws. So to give you an example, you know how we have the antique market on Sundays? The antique market does not fall under this bylaw because it's not part of the Vendors Association. If the Vendors Association had its own bylaws and was self-governing, we would not need the bylaw that's in front of you. We would have a different type of partnership agreement with the association. So this bylaw is really about the governance of the Vendors Association in the context of the 3 days a week market, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday.
Right, okay. Okay, I can see that logic, that's fine. I guess some of these questions are out there just to be looked at, but the one that hit me most was when if you think if we're going to have a full-time marketing or market manager, we have to figure out a way to pay that person. We've got a part-time one now. I don't actually know what else they do, but I'm sure it's plenty. So I just wanted to raise that, like, how are we going to pay this? For this, and it doesn't mean the fees are going up and things of that sort. And how affordable is that?
So thank you, Councillor Hutchison. So there are a couple of options that can be explored. So if it was to be done through the city, so if this was a city employee, we could look at increasing the number of hours of our part-time positions that we currently have. We do have partners that we have reached out to, such as DBIA, et cetera, that do have obviously an interest in the market and seeing a successful market that could potentially contribute to this. That's of course if it's done through the city. If the market becomes an independent self-governed organization, then they have the ability to also hire their own manager, the same way that the Memorial Centre Farmers Market has been quite successful to do and has grown substantially in the last couple of years. So they would have the ability to do that. And from a city perspective, we could be a partner in that with other stakeholders in the community. So there are different ways that it could be potentially financed and organized. And that's why we want to take some time over 2021 to try to figure that out and work with the Vendors Association.
Okay, fair enough. Did we give any thought about the resellers and how to deal with them in terms of just grandfathering the ones that are already there? I noticed they're down to about 2 or 3, depending how much you rely on the 2020 stats.
So thank you for this question. Yes, we have. You're correct that there aren't a large number of resellers currently at the public market. So we have essentially taken them into consideration in such a way that we have not changed anything that would substantially impact them. So we have not changed anything that, in terms of their attendance. The attendance change is only applicable to the producers. So the resellers are still required to meet that attendance of over the 3-day period. And the fees are remaining the same. So There's not necessarily a lot of change at this point for the resellers that are there. I think before any significant changes are contemplated, I think a couple of things. One is we need to think about what would the market look like in the absence of resellers, meaning if we have a market that operates 3 days and we have producers that are telling us they can only attend 1 day, how do we ensure that there are activities in the market during those 3 days? So that may be a scheduling issue. It could be that resellers change their format to only resell local. So that's something we actually heard from one of the producers, that they like to have the ability to actually hire their local producer, but they don't have the time, nor do they want to be on the square for full days. So they actually pay a reseller to sell their produce, but their local produce. So there are different ways that this can be looked at in the future, but we want to make sure that there's proper time given to that with the Vendors Association, and knowing that the season was going to start soon, with essentially licenses being issued at the end of March. We didn't feel that there was enough time for this particular season to look at any significant changes.
Oh, good. Well, I didn't know about the hiring of the resellers, so that's interesting. The and you answered another question of mine with regard to the structure you saw if it became self-sustaining vendor association at the public market. And so I'll just leave that. So those are my questions. Any other questions from the council, from the committee? Seeing none. Any I'll go to the clerk here for a second. Any questions from the public?
There's no members of the public, but we will get Councillor Holland just to declare her pecuniary interest and the nature of it before we proceed to the next briefing.
Certainly.
Thank you. Sorry for being late getting here, and I didn't get to read it off at the outset. And now I can't, oh, here, give me 1 second. I, Mayor Rita Holland, of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston, declare my pecuniary interest in the matter of Clause 1 report, local food strategy and amendments to the Kingston Public Market Bylaw, as I am a prospective vendor at the Memorial Center Farmers Market.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so there was no public comments. We're back to the committee. And I suppose this is where I read the motion. So the clerk can correct me if I'm wrong here, but half a second while I go there. Okay, so the recommendation is that the Arts, Recreation, and Community Policies Committee recommend to Council the following: that the bylaw attached as Exhibit A to report number ARC P 21007, the bylaw respecting the Kingston Public Market, be presented to Council for all 3 readings to repeal bylaw number 2006-118 as amended in its entirety. The council directs staff to assign required resources to support the Kingston Public Market Vendors Association to develop a self-governing, not-for-profit corporation with the intent to establish a different operating model in 2022. And the council endorsed waiving fees for the Kingston Memorial Center Farmers Market, as well as the West Kingston Market, should it be operating on city-owned property in 2021. And the council endorsed an option for a 50% reduction in fees for producers of the Kingston Public Market, as described in report RP 21007, and that bylaw be presented to council for all three readings to amend bylaw number 2005-10, bylaw to establish fees and charges to be collected by the corporation of the city of Kingston, as amended, attached as Exhibit B to report ARC 21007 in order to remove the $142.60 sabbatical leave and a leave of absence fee for the Kingston Public Market and reduce casual produce fee from $48.76 per day to $30 per day, and that council endorse the proposed short-term changes to all markets and direct staff to pursue long-term changes described in report number RP 21-007. So.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Mhm.
We will just require consent of the committee to go to the next business item before the second.
No, we've got to
briefing.
make this is a motion. I'm going to be looking for a mover and a seconder. Am I not correct about that?
Yeah, I'll just get Miss James to jump in here. She has her hand up.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. I believe what Julia was indicating is that we do have two briefings tonight. Usually we listen to both briefings before we listen to the business item, but if the committee consents to have briefing business item, we can do it that way. We just need the consent of the committee to do it.
Well, okay. That'll be faster, I think. So, not regular, but faster. The, I really don't want the power, honestly. So we have a mover and a seconder for that motion that I just read at long length. Moved by Councillor Bohm, seconded by Councillor Sanic. Is there any discussion of the motion? None. Okay, so with that, all those in favor? And that passes unanimously. So now we're on to the next item, and that is the next briefing, which is by Danica Lockhead regarding Arts in the Public Places Working Group updated and expanded terms of reference report. Oh, there she is. Right there. Okay. Okay, go ahead. Ms. Lockhead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening to the committee. It's great to be here to share with you the proposed updated and expanded terms of reference of the Art in Public Places Working Group in support of the city's public art program. Next slide, please. The Art in Public Places Working Group was first established following the approval of the public art policy in 2015, which guides the implementation of the public art program and provides council, staff, the art sector, and the broader community with a mechanism to assess, acquire, and manage works of public art for municipally owned public spaces. The public art program supports the creation of contemporary public art by emerging and established artists through commissions and artist collaborations, produces art for public spaces throughout the city, contributing to developing a vibrant public realm in Kingston, and enhances our sense of community across the city in the downtown, suburban, rural, and natural areas. Next slide, please. The public art policy outlines roles and responsibilities of 4 core groups, one of them being the Art in Public Places Working Group. And so I've just provided a bit of a snapshot of these groups here as a refresher. The 4 groups include the Cultural Services Department. So this group is responsible for the management of the public art program. That includes program management, coordination, and management of the public art collection itself. The Interdepartmental Public Art Group is an internal group involving city staff who identify capital projects and priorities and provide advice from start to finish of a public art project across different city departments. The Art in Public Places Working Group, which is what we're here today to talk about, exists as a working group of the Arts Advisory Committee, made up of committee members and community representatives who are approved by council on an annual basis. This group is responsible for reviewing processes, policies, plans, and projects related to the public art program. And then finally, the fourth group outlined in the policy is the mayor, council, and committees of council. And the policy outlines them as an arm's length of any acquisition processes, but responsible for reviewing and approving the City of Kingston's public art master plan and policy, approving municipal capital plan allocations and public art plans, and where applicable, approving negotiated agreements with private developers that may contain sections related to the provision of public art. So these 4 groups work together to implement the City of Kingston public art program. Next slide, please. The Art and Public Places Working Group current terms of reference are embedded within the public art policy. And this is the current description. And we've talked about the first 2 points, but currently the terms of reference also include the additional responsibility of the working group to include reviewing donation requests and making recommendations to staff, and reviewing, nominating, and approving members of art selection juries. Next slide, please. Given the evolution of the public art program as it continues to grow, we are proposing updates and amendments to the terms of reference for this working group. The current terms of reference are still included in what we're proposing for the new terms of reference, but we've expanded it to better reflect where the program is heading in this moment. And so on this slide here, the bolded points are the new additions to the terms of reference for this working group, which include acting as a resource to staff, city department and agencies, the arts community, partners including developers and citizens, advising on the development and implementation of maintenance for the public art collection and for accessioning and de-accessioning of works associated with the public art policy and the civic collections policy in accordance with the Heritage Assets Working Group, providing expertise, fair advice, and guidance to staff on matters involving public art, raising awareness and understanding of the importance of public art in the city, which is an ongoing part of our work as staff in terms of promoting why public art is important to a city. And then finally, advising staff as to the changing conditions and impact of broader policies, programs, and regulations on the Kingston arts sector. Next slide, please. In addition to the updates and expansion to the mandate of the working group, we're also proposing a more detailed description of the makeup of membership for this working group. Currently in the policy, it does not have this level of detail in terms of who makes up this working group. And so we've expanded it to include 7 to 9 working group members, including at least 2 members of the Arts Advisory Committee to be appointed by City Council as follows: 2 artists active in the community, 3 other art professionals, so curators, gallery directors, artistic directors, programmers, conservators, anyone who has a thorough knowledge of contemporary visual or public art in Kingston, 1 urban designer, so architects or designers, 1 developer, 1 member of the business community, and a general member of the business community. So a couple points I just want to make on this piece. So the majority, since the working group was established, the majority of the membership has been artists and arts professionals. So that will continue in this moment. But the 2 pieces, the additions really in terms of an urban designer, developer, and member of the business community really reflect where the program is going, as well as how our public art master plan is written. And so one of our main focus areas in our public art master plan is the support of private development public art projects. And so that is where, you know, the developer and the urban designer piece comes into play for this working group. And the addition of a member of the business community is in recognition of the role of public art in business improvement and development, and wanting to forge those relationships with the local business community in support of public art. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of the working group support that is expected in 2021. It includes initiatives like reviewing artist qualifications and proposals for direct commissions, continuing to recruit and support staff in the selection of juries for public art projects, review and advise on maintenance manual strategy for civic collection public artworks. This is a big priority for us this year, as we are going to see 3 new civic collection public artworks come online and be unveiled to the public this year. So ensuring that we have a really robust strategy in place will be important. Review and support planning of art and public places framework. So this is an initiative outlined in our master plan to create a mechanism for artist and community initiated projects that can be submitted to the city, reviewed by the city, and then supported for implementation. Offering input on artists and art sector professional development opportunities and programs that support awareness building and appreciation of public art in Kingston. And then finally, reviewing and providing input on our 2021 public art projects and support the planning that will take place this year for a renewal of a public art master plan in 2022. Next slide, please. So next steps for us, pending approval of these updated and expanded terms of reference, we will work with the Arts Advisory Committee to appoint members to the working group for 2021 that will then be submitted to council for review and approval. Final slide, please. And so just to close, I wanted to share just a snapshot of some of the projects of the working group since it was first established, and what it will look like in the future, some of the projects that they've supported over the years. And so this is an inclusion of projects that have come and gone, projects that are currently taking place, and projects that are to come. I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee regarding that briefing? I don't see any. I have one question. It was unclear to me. It seemed to me the Arts Advisory Committee will appoint the members of the subcommittee. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's correct. The appointment of the recommendations, I should say, of the members of the Art and Public Places Working Group are formed through the Arts Advisory Committee, which then would make their way to council for approval.
Okay, I just wasn't sure whether it was going through nominations at some point or not. Okay, and therefore the Cultural Services Department will run its own request to the public to fill those positions. Is that correct?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yes, I mean, we will work with the Arts Committee to promote this opportunity to the public. The Arts Advisory Committee will be tasked with bringing forward names for consideration for this working group.
Okay. So now, just to be clear, it said in the report that the role of council is arm's length. I got no problem with that. So if this group were to decide, and I guess with cultural services, I'm just looking for the weighting of the authority in this, on a public art piece related to a standing building or a development, who has the final say about where it's going and what it is?
So thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a good question. Again, understanding the different roles of the working group, of the various groups that support the public art implementation. So council specifically is arm's length from the acquisition process. And so council is responsible for approving the overarching strategies that guide the implementation of the public art master plan. So this is what happened in 2014. A master plan was brought to council for approval. It laid out the framework, the focus areas, and the goals of the public art master plan that council approved. City staff then went away, Cultural Services Department went away, developed plans and work plans in consultation with other members of the Interdepartmental Public Art Group. So again, made up of colleagues of ours across various departments in the city of Kingston. And in certain situations, particularly at the beginning of the program, we did bring to council plans for public art capital projects that were approved by council. So it's an approval of a plan that is proposed for public art that council is responsible for, but it is the role of cultural services staff in consultation with the Art and Public Places Working Group, the Interdepartmental Working Group, and other stakeholders in the community to develop the plans specific for these projects.
Fair enough. Thank you. That's okay. So any other questions from the committee? Not seeing any. Oh, there's Mr. Whittington. He wants to say something. He was there, and then go ahead. Your picture changed positions.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify and build on what Ms. Lockheed was saying. That also to clarify that the Art and Public Places Working Group helps staff and the Arts Advisory Committee to assemble juries specific to projects. So that's where the process really resides in terms of decision making through those juries that are individually established to support different projects. They're the ones through public consultation and other mechanisms that gather information from the community. Projects are revised and finalized, and it's those groups then that endorse a project moving forward, and then that information is shared with council for ratification, but the actual decision making lies with the specific juries that get established.
Great, thank you. It's quite the labyrinth. You have to. Okay. I read all of that, but I didn't get it as clearly as it just been stated by the two of you. So so that's good. I keep waiting for somebody else on the committee to say, now wait a minute. So I guess following our procedure tonight, I have to ask if there's any comment from the public, if there is public. Madam Clerk.
There is no members of the public, but they also don't speak during a briefing, so.
No, but we changed the way we were doing it. I'm just being consistent with the.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's no members of the public.
Okay, thank you for trying to do your best in the face of a certain amount of incompetence by looks of things. So, okay, so I'm going to now read the motion, and then someone can hopefully move it and second it. So I have to trail down here. This one's particularly, doesn't really show everything that's going on here. That the terms of reference, that the Arts, Recreation and Community Policies Committee recommend to council the following. That the terms of reference for the Art in Public Places Working Group as described in Exhibit A, attached to the report ARC P 21005 be approved, and that the updated terms of reference for the Art in Public Places Working Group be appended to the public art policy, and that a bylaw be presented to council to amend bylaw 205, and bylaw to define the mandate meeting procedures for committees established by the corporation of the city of Kingston as amended as per Exhibit B, attached to report number RP 21005 to formalize the terms of reference for the Art and Public Places Working Group in the Working Group section of the Arts Advisory Committee mandate, and that the bylaw be presented to council to amend bylaw 2010-205, a bylaw to define the mandate and meeting procedures for committees established by the corporation of the city of Kingston as amended as per Exhibit C, attached to report number RP 21005, to remove the terms of reference for the Professional Development Working Group in the Working Group section of the Advisory Committee mandate. And I think there's a bit more here. No, that's it. So that's the motion. The last bit references to the Professional Development Working Group. They completed what they were to do, and so that's why they're being removed. So do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Holland. And Councillor Ostrov will second. Thank you very much. So it's on the floor. Does anyone have any comments? I don't see any. Okay, so I'll just say a couple of things. One, it was actually a really well written report. It was just very technical and procedural. And I thought I made my way through it, but apparently I didn't get a grasp absolutely everything I needed to. So, but I don't think I'm probably alone there. Not talking about the committee, but the casual viewer, of course. The so we have a mover and a seconder. We don't have any other comments. If you do, now's the time. So not seeing that. All those in favor of the motion? And that passes. Councillor Bohm is apparently against it. No, he's not against it. That's a double negative. We'll take him as positive. Okay, so okay, so that was great. I'm sure a ton of work went into that. Get a very small hearing. Okay, so now we're on to a bylaw to regulate the setting and maintaining of open air fires. Now there's something we can all be concerned about. And I see Mr. Chief, I'm sorry, Sean Armstrong is here to speak of that. I'm not sure of your title. Oh, you're not.
Good evening. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Hey, good evening, Chair and committee members. I'm joined tonight with Chief Fire Prevention Officer Wazadowski and Deputy Fire Chief Kevin Donaldson to present the bylaw. I just wanted to give some opening comments. The report followed a 12-week public engagement process and also quite an involved process involving our First Nations people, thanks to Colin Wigington and his staff. So we really appreciated the help with that. We solicited feedback from both our rural and our urban residents, and we feel that this bylaw will add clarity to the community and help people have safe and enjoyable open air fires. That's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we going to hear, is there anyone else going to contribute to this briefing, or you just take questions?
We would hope to, yeah, I'm happy to take questions.
Sure.
We hope the report speaks for itself and that we've covered everything in the with respect to open air fires.
Thank you, Chief. Councillor Ostrov and then Councillor Holland.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just you want to thank the chiefs, fire chiefs, and the team putting this together. I know in the rural experience was very positive, as I really felt there was really effective engagement and from both sides. And so I think that we've learned a little bit from each other, but also that we recognize the two zones. And I think that was really refreshing as a rural councillor, that it is okay to see the north, the rural and the urban have just slightly different perspectives at different times. And that's to be expected and okay. So I wanted to commend that and the process that I was part of, and I've seen it in different committees. So I just want to commend them, and I know that this will pass, and it should be commended as a well-done project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holland, and then Councillor Sanig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, my thanks to Chief Armstrong, who I've been in contact with quite a lot over the years, on you and others who worked hard on the bylaw. I have a question about the nuance, the definition of nuisance. So just going through some of the terms, what would be considered a nuisance is something that could create, like amongst other things, the definition could create a dangerous condition. Dangerous condition is defined in terms of fire safety, so whether that would have the potential to cause a fire, a large dangerous fire, which I completely understand. I'm wondering, some people when they reach out on this issue, they talk about the this nature of the smoke, that it's suffocating, that it's potentially that's harming existing health conditions or potentially causing future health conditions. And I was just wondering, is there, in cases like that, I mean, if folks have those concerns, are they going to be advised on where to take those, or is it simply, I guess, if they're reporting it, then the idea would be that that the fire would be, we'd have to make sure that the fire never happened again. But are there further sort of recommendations for people if they're talking about air pollution, et cetera, based on fires that occur?
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. And we intend to do during the first year implementation, if this is passed, we'll do a comprehensive community engagement process around education and awareness. And absolutely, Councillor Holland, the nuisance aspect will still be in play. If somebody is having a fire and it's not considerate of the neighbor's experience and is causing distress and nuisance, we will always have staff attend and assess that. Explain the application of the bylaw and what we're looking to achieve through engagement and awareness rather than enforcement of compliance to a bylaw. So we anticipate that once people understand the requirements, we feel that we've added acceptable setbacks within the schedules so that people really understand that this isn't just about having the open fire, it's all about the impact it has to the adjacent properties around you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Sanik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Chief Armstrong. I think like right from one of my first few months on the job, like in 2007, I got a complaint and then I went to the city and they said, no, you give that to the fire department. And then over all these years, I've never understood, like the open air fire concept. And like, I feel so terrible not being able to help somebody. I just go, I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to call the fire department because I don't really understand it myself. So it's great that we have a bylaw because I always felt so bad just referring people to the fire department without being able to give them a definitive answer. So this, it gives us a lot of clarity as well. Now we know what the rules are. And so I was happy to see that someone cannot burn furniture, because those are some complaints that I get is, they're just, especially last summer, they're just like having this fire in their backyard and I see them putting a dresser in there. And then I also was going to have the question that Councillor Holland asked about smoke. So I've gotten questions about smoke before that this person's having it. So really, if it's a good fire, like I don't have an open air, I don't have a fire pit or anything, but if it's a good fire, it's not supposed to produce smoke that goes to the neighbors. Is that what, like a good high quality, like you're doing it right? If you're doing it right, is it not supposed to produce smoke?
Absolutely. We've, through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, if you're burning the right materials and you're doing it appropriately, and through our appraisal of the tenants within the bylaw, we really found that this seems to be the best practice across the province. We followed that, and our appraisal also found that we weren't really allowed to permit fires under the Fire Protection Prevention Act and the Fire Code. It can only be permitted after the authority having jurisdiction passes a bylaw. So this was part of a learning process for everybody. We learned a lot through our consultations with Cultural Services, Director Wigington, and in terms of our First Nations people and how we approach sacred and ceremonial fires. So that was very important. So we wanted to make sure that we connected with all of the community people that would have interest and were stakeholders in this process. We do have a lot more work to do with our First Nations people to share our learnings and create an environment where when there's a sacred or ceremonial fire of any religious denomination or any culture, that we're approaching it in a way that's considerate and thoughtful.
Thank you. I think that through you, Mr. Chair, I think the complaints I was getting about smoke had nothing to do with like any type of religious or indigenous ceremony. They were just burning bad things. I know that one complaint last summer was that they were having an open air fire and burning bad things, but then they were trying to say, oh, like, look, we put a grill on top and we're doing wieners. And so where we have the exemptions, and one of them is like barbecues and charcoal appliances and smokers, if someone just plops like a grill on top of their fire pit to put some wieners on and it's causing smoke, would that wouldn't be exempt anymore, right? Like would that person, the neighbor, be allowed to complain because it's not properly done?
Through you, Mr. Chair, those fires are not commensurate with the type and nature of food being cooked, so they would not be allowed.
Okay, super. Thank you for clarifying that. And then if smoke or whatever, someone is still burning furniture, the complaint mechanism then, so it's 10 o'clock at night, the next door neighbor's doing this, who do they phone? And when the complaint is looked at, is it our bylaw officers coming out, or is it the fire department, like someone from the fire department coming and checking that out? How does that actually work?
Well, absolutely. Through you, Mr. Chair, if somebody has a fire safety concern and it's after hours, by all means, call the fire department either through the admin line, or if they believe there's an imminent threat or danger, to call 911, obviously. We will go out and assess the situation, make sure the area is safe, put the scene into a safe situation, take all the necessary particulars and follow up. Our fire inspectors will follow up and potentially lay a summons under Part 3 of the Provincial Offences Act, and charges will be laid if they're warranted.
Perfect, thank you. So I did wonder if it would be still the fire department coming out to do the inspection when it is a complaint. So you answered that, that's great. And then my last question is just about the exemption. So if the device has an automatic shut off, then like for the natural gas high-end ones or the propane ones, they're allowed. And, you know, like those are definitely high-end ones that some of the landscaping companies, the Wentworth companies, you know, will put into someone's backyard. They're beautiful, but they would still have to comply to the setbacks that we see in the bylaw, being, you know, 9 meters away or whatever those bylaw stipulations. Do those exact specs apply also to the natural shutoff devices? Or automatic shut-off devices, sorry.
If it's an approved appliance and it's being used within the manufacturer specification, they'd be allowed, obviously. We do have other appliances that burn natural materials like wood and other Class A materials that would be subject to a review, but we're always happy to come out and consult first. We'd rather do that than come out, and we'd like to consult and educate rather than attend and enforce. And that's not the intent in the first year of the bylaw. It'll be really a learning opportunity for the community, and we'll get feedback and we'll be reasonable about that. But off appliances will be allowed.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Bone, please.
Thank you, Mr. Good evening, Chief. I just wanted to say thank you to you and your team for all the consultation on this. I know the East End Facebook group was quite lively at one point when people were concerned that they weren't going to be able to use some of their devices. So on behalf of everybody, and also the great work that Chief Wazadowski did, providing a lot of wording clarification and truly showing that this was a consultation and a process that was built in conjunction with feedback from the community, was very well received. And Also, the fact that it was education first for the next little bit has also been very well received. So kudos to you and your team. This has been, I've had a lot of feedback where people said they really enjoyed the consultation progress and the process throughout this entire endeavor. And they said it was a great opportunity to get to know some of their chief fire prevention officers a little bit better. We spent quite a bit of time on the phone with some constituents. So thanks very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other, Councillor Stanek, you have another question?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, just the last question. So when council passes this, Chief Armstrong, and Councillor Bone was just saying we're focusing on education. So when would people be required to get the permit? Just so I can I know I'm going to get some questions about that. We approve it at council, then they have to get the permit starting this summer?
So our chief fire prevention officer is working with staff and the communications team to present a plan to do just that. Following the passing of the bylaw, we'll put together a plan, and obviously the permit is a no fee permit. It's really it's an opportunity to go online or pick up the phone and call us, and we'll give you the parameters around the bylaw. You'll have most people, after they're done that consultation, whether it's online or directly through the Office of the Fire Prevention staff, they'll be able to go forward, get that permit. And I do.
Okay. Thank you.
The answer was this summer then. Hey,
Just a
Councillor
sec,
Bone, this summer?
one of the host has something she wanted to say.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, for the interruption. It looks like Chief Armstrong, we lost him there, but it looks like he might be back. He could answer the question.
Yeah, he did answer the question. I think he did it without moving his lips. I think that was the trick. So he's a ventriloquist of some sort, apparently.
You had a fire call, Chair.
Right.
Yeah, right. So I admit that I was like, oh, one of the other fire people was answering. So anyway, anyone else on the committee being provoked to a question, so to speak? No? Well, I've got a couple of questions. This was not a question I had, but when listening to Councillor Stanek, I wondered, could you explain what our approach to marshmallows and wieners is? Something tells me this could be, something we need to know.
Well, obviously, fires for enjoyment, warmth, and recreation, they've been prevalent, obviously, over the past year. Our complaints and concerns have over doubled. So if you're having a campfire and it fits within the zones as spelled out within the schedules of the bylaw, by all means, cook marshmallows or wieners and have a family event. We're just setting some permissions around how to do that safely and making sure that everybody's aware of that, so that we're respectful of your right to have a fire under the bylaw and all.
Mr. Chair, he must be in the rural area.
Oh, now that's not on the agenda, Councillor Oosterhoff, but nice point. Yes,
Mr. Chair,
Elizabeth.
if I could just make a suggestion, if Chief Armstrong wishes to turn off his video, it might assist with keeping him in the meeting, and then we can still hear his responses.
Okay.
Absolutely, marshmallows and wieners are allowed, and we hope that that's done safely and within the parameters of the fires.
Yes, we did. Thank you. We heard you, and then suddenly you were cut off as well. So there's a bit of instability there, and I think the host is just making sure you cut down the amount of energy or connection on your internet that you're relying on, unfortunately. So next question. Okay. it was pointed out in the report that it was the opinion of Native people that were consulted that it was not appropriate to have ceremonial fire referenced as part of the bylaw. Now, I think I'm fine with that. I just wanted to understand a little bit more about that. And
through you, Mr. Chair.
It's religious and sacred, so that's the reason, but perhaps you know more.
Yeah, they absolutely were in support of the bylaw. They didn't feel that it was necessary to separate out any special acknowledgement in the bylaw. They wanted to, through our consultations, it was determined that we would work with our First Nations people to learn about sacred and ceremonial fires, learn about the role of the fire keeper. They have a specific role in that community, and then make sure that we understand where those fires are happening and when, so that we don't call on emergency resources to roll up on a fire and cause a disturbance just by our response. So they felt that the bylaw covered sacred and ceremonial fires, but they didn't necessarily want anything specific to their community or their First Nations people.
Okay, thank you.
And I could add, Mr. Chair, we are going to continue our consultations with our First Nations community to flesh out through that education and communication plan just the role of the fire keeper, so our staff really understand what that role is and how important it is to that community.
That sounds really good. And also just right here, applaud your plan to have a year of education for the public at large while they get used to this change. It talks about outdoor appliances are allowed. Does that include the sort of backyard, I don't know what to call them, in the semi-open containers some people in the last few years have started to adopt?
Yes, like the chimneys or the fire bowls, Mr. Chair, those are definitely, that was part of the feedback we received from the community. And that was a change, an adjustment we made to the bylaw to permit those in the, we'll call it the South Zone, and that they are now allowed, and that, you know, we did provide some guidelines around setbacks and side setbacks when they do install those appliances.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll have something to say about that a little later. Final question. Just as a matter of public policy, and just waiting to see what response there is here. If we're not charging for a permit, is this not inviting an attitude that whether one has a permit or not does not matter very much? Aside from the fines, because we're not going to be doing that at first, and I suspect we'll try to avoid it when we can.
Well, we've, through you, Mr.
Yes
Chair,
and no answers. Let me just explain that in the survey, a lot of people were fine with paying something for a permit, not a lot, but something. So just as a matter of public policy, that's what I'm looking for. How you arrived at that.
Well, we felt that no, we didn't need the permit fee as important in the implementation of the bylaw. We did understand that we would assess the administrative burden on that effort, and if necessary, we would come back with recommendations with a revision to that fee in the fees and charges bylaw. But we felt that it was most important for us to understand where these fires were occurring, so we could start to resist the need to respond resources unnecessarily to that. So if we had people that understood the requirements, filled out the permit, we would have an awareness that would be put into our response system, and we would have a better awareness in the community of where these fires are happening. We could also target education and communications to the areas that have a lot of permits and we can start to tailor some of our fire prevention and public education in those areas.
Great, thank you very much. So that's my questions. Any other questions from the committee? Councillor Sanic.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just when am I muted again?
No, you're okay now.
Now you can, okay. Sorry, Mr. Chair, my very last question, Chief Armstrong. Do people have to apply for it every single year, Chief Armstrong? I thought I saw it's an annual permit, but now I don't see that.
It will be an annual permit fee, is my understanding.
Okay. All right. So would it be going from like every January or like calendar year, or is it more like a spring, every spring going into the summer season? How does the renewal process work?
I'm gonna ask Chief Pozadowski to comment on that. He's been working on the plan.
Thanks, Chief. Through you, Mr. Chair. It's per calendar year. So we really don't have, at this time, there's no curfews. You can burn throughout the year. I know some municipalities kind of have a burn season, whether it's April 1st to the end of October, but where the permit would be for per calendar year.
Okay, thank you. So this year it might only be like from May until December, but then it'll be like every January you should renew it so that you're all good and ready for, you know, like when you can be outside again.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. You can see I have a lot of fire things in like my suburb district. So, all right, thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And it's good to know where the pyromaniacs are. So I think the chief said that they wanted to track that. And maybe not quite that way, he said it. But anyway, I can't remember. Let's see, just 1 second. I'm just trying to find out whether we have a. Yes, we have a recommendation. So now we'll go to, before we do that, we go to the public. There is no public, I believe. The clerk said that earlier. It's still,
still no members of the public, Mr. Chair.
Ah, okay, thank you. All right, so I will read the recommendation and we'll look for a mover and a seconder. The recommendation that the Arts, Recreation and Community Policies Committee recommend to Council that the bylaw, being a bylaw to regulate the setting and maintaining of open air fires in the city of Kingston as per Exhibit A, attached to report number RP 21002, draft bylaw to regulate the setting and maintaining of open air fires in the city of Kingston, be approved. And that upon council approval of the proposed bylaw, a bylaw to regulate the setting and maintaining of open air fires in the city of Kingston, attached as Exhibit A, attached to report number RP 21002, staff be directed to submit the required set fine application for approval of set fines in the amount set out in Exhibit B to report number RP 21002. So that is the recommendation before us. Is there a mover and a seconder? Councillor Sanic and Councillor Bone. Okay, so do we have any comments? I don't see any hands. We're a really reticent group tonight. So I have one comment, and that is, I read the best practices thing. I scanned through it anyway on other cities, and this is a very relative to other places. I mean, they allowed you to have open air fire in one place. I think they said you had to be 150 meters from any structure or building. And there are a few other things in there. So I think this proposal is actually fairly libertarian and should satisfy even Councillor Oosterhoff. So I'm just teasing. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, as the chief said, right? They reserve the right to come back. And I have to say, the reports of the number of open air fires that they've been called to in last year, you know, sometimes these numbers we get from staff are a bit shocking, right? 300. So the bylaws in order. I think that was the conclusion staff came to. So I'm done. Anybody else? Not seeing anybody. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously as well. So that's great. And unless I'm corrected by the clerk, I'm going to proceed with item 8, motions. There are none. Item 9, notices of motion. 10, other business. 11, we have correspondence, 2 letters from Catherine Porter regarding the arts and art administration. Number 12 is date of next meeting is Thursday, April the 22nd at 6 p.m. So you can write that in. And finally, number 13, adjournment. Moved by Councilor McLaren, seconded by Councilor Holland. All those in favor? Come on, guys. Okay, all those in favor? We passed unanimously, I'm pretty sure. We just got to the finish line there, folks. So thanks very much. Appreciate it. Thank you to the clerk. And I'm sorry I messed up your first meeting. So